The bottle shattered against the marble floor, and I watched my sister's face drain of color as the amber liquid pooled at her feet. The scent, my scent, rose up between us like an accusation. "That's not yours," I said quietly, and Maya's hand flew to her throat where she dabbed it just moments before. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but we both knew she was lying, just like she'd lied about everything else. The thing is, I'd died once already. 3 months ago, in my first life, I'd thrown myself off our penthouse balcony after discovering that Maya had stolen everything from me: my designs, my fiancé, my entire future. I'd watched from 20 stories up as she kissed David in the garden below, wearing my custom perfume, the one I'd spent 2 years developing, the one that was supposed to launch my career as a perfumer. I'd jumped. And somehow, impossibly, I'd woken up 6 months earlier on my 23rd birthday with every memory of my betrayal intact. This time, I'd changed the formula. "Maya," I said, watching her scratch at her collarbone, "you might want to wash that off." She was already clawing at her neck, her arms, anywhere the perfume had touched. Within seconds, angry red welts began to bloom across her skin like poisonous flowers. "What did you do?" she shrieked, and I smiled. "I made sure," I said, "that you'd never be able to steal from me again." Let me take you back to the beginning, or rather, to the end that became my beginning. I was born into wealth, but not love. My mother died when I was 3, and my father remarried within a year to a woman who came with a daughter exactly my age. Victoria, my stepmother, was beautiful, charming, and utterly convinced that Maya deserved everything, while I deserved nothing. My father, Richard Chen, was a man who'd built an empire but couldn't be bothered to notice his own daughter drowning in his house. He traveled constantly, signed the checks Victoria told him to sign, and believed every lie she whispered in his ear. Maya and I looked similar enough to pass as real sisters, both of us with dark hair and light eyes, both slender and tall. But where I was quiet and studious, Maya was vivacious and cruel. She learned early that she could take what was mine and face no consequences. It started small: a borrowed dress that came back stained, a piece of jewelry that mysteriously vanished, my homework that she copied, my ideas that she claimed as her own. And every time I complained, Victoria would smile that razor-sharp smile and say, "Sisters share, Iris, don't be selfish." By the time we were teenagers, I'd learned to keep everything that mattered locked away. I threw myself into my passion, perfumery. I spent hours in the converted greenhouse I'd claimed as my lab, mixing oils and essences, studying the chemistry of scent. It was the one place Maya never followed me. She hated the smell of raw materials, called my hobby playing with stink water. I didn't care. In that greenhouse, surrounded by my hundreds of bottles and my notebooks full of formulas, I was free. I got into Stanford to study chemistry. Maya barely scraped into a state school for communications, but Victoria convinced my father to donate enough money to get her into Stanford, too. We ended up in the same dorm building. She immediately joined a sorority, partied constantly, and failed half her classes. I worked myself to exhaustion, took every advanced chemistry and business course I could, and dreamed of the day I could launch my own perfume line. Senior year, I met David Park at a chemistry symposium. He was brilliant, funny, and kind, or so I thought. He was getting his MBA, planning to go into luxury goods marketing. When I told him about my dream of starting a perfume company, his eyes lit up. He said we'd be perfect partners. We fell in love, or I did anyway. I see now that he fell in love with my potential, my family's money, and the easy life I represented. For my senior thesis, I created my masterpiece, a perfume called Iris Ascending. It was a complex blend of iris root, bergamot, jasmine, and a dozen other notes, with a proprietary molecule I'd synthesized myself that made it last for hours without turning sharp or chemical. It was elegant, sophisticated, and utterly unique. I'd poured 2 years of work into it, hundreds of iterations, thousands of hours. I wore it to my thesis defense. I wore it when David proposed. I wore it the night I showed him my business plan for launching it as the flagship scent of my own brand. That was my first mistake. The second was telling Maya. I was so happy, so naive. I thought maybe finally she'd be happy for me. I was graduating summa cum laude. I had a ring on my finger. My father had finally agreed to invest in my business. Everything was coming together. Maya smiled and hugged me and said she was so proud. 2 weeks later, I found her in David's apartment. They weren't just sleeping together, they'd been together for months. And they weren't just betraying me romantically. Spread across David's dining table were my notebooks, my formulas, my business plan, everything. I'm sorry, Iris, David said, and he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. But Maya understands the vision better. She's got the personality for this. You're too internal. No one would buy perfume from someone like you. Maya stood behind him, wearing my engagement ring and my perfume, and she smiled. You can still work for us, though. We'll need a good chemist. I ran. I ran all the way back to our penthouse, up to my room, and then I kept going, up the stairs to the roof garden, and I didn't stop when I reached the railing. I remember the fall. I remember the impact. I remember dying, watching my blood pool on the white marble of our driveway, and thinking at least it was over. Then I woke up in my bed 6 months earlier on my 23rd birthday at Hutgads. First, I thought it was a nightmare. Then I checked my phone. The date was impossible. I looked at my hand, no engagement ring. I ran to my greenhouse and found my thesis notebook from that period. 6 months before I'd defended it, I was back. I'd been given another chance, and I was going to use it to destroy them all. The thing about dying and coming back is that it gives you clarity. In my first life, I'd been so desperate to be loved, to be accepted, that I'd let them walk all over me. I'd shared everything, trusted everyone, and believed that if I just worked hard enough, was good enough, kind enough, they'd finally see my worth. What a fool I'd been. This time, I knew the truth. Maya would never change. Victoria would never love me. David was a parasite looking for a host, and my father would never choose me over his comfortable delusions. I couldn't change them, but I could change myself, and I could change my strategy. The first thing I did was move my formulas. I'd been keeping them in my laptop and a physical notebook in my greenhouse. This time, I bought a safe deposit box at a bank across town and stored everything there. I created dummy notebooks full of deliberately flawed formulas and left them in my greenhouse. Let them steal those if they wanted. The second thing I did was start building evidence. I installed hidden cameras in my greenhouse, in my room, anywhere Maya might go snooping. I kept meticulous records of every conversation, every theft, every lie. The third thing, and this was the most important, was the perfume itself. In my first life, Iris Ascending had been my calling card, my signature scent. Everyone knew it was mine. When Maya wore it, people just assumed we shared. We were sisters, after all. But I knew the truth. She'd worn it on her first date with David, the date where she'd seduced him away from me. She'd worn my scent like war paint, marking her territory, and no one had questioned it because she was Maya, and Maya always got what she wanted. This time, I made 2 versions. The first was Iris Ascending, exactly as I'd created it before. Beautiful, sophisticated, perfect. I kept the real formula locked away, but I made a single bottle and stored it in my safe deposit box. The second version looked identical. Same bottle, same label. But the formula was different. It started out identical to the original. For the first hour, it would smell exactly the same. But I'd added a compound that degraded in contact with skin oils, releasing a secondary molecule I'd designed specifically for this purpose. That molecule was an allergen, a carefully calibrated irritant derived from urushiol, the compound in poison ivy. Not enough to be dangerous, but more than enough to cause an impressive, uncomfortable, and highly visible rash. I'd tested it on myself with a tiny amount, just to be sure it worked. It did. Spectacularly. I left the modified version in my greenhouse in a beautiful display box where Maya couldn't possibly miss it. Then I waited. I went through the motions of my life, classes, lab work, studying, but I was watching, always watching. I saw Maya's eyes linger on the perfume bottle every time she came into my greenhouse looking for something to steal. I saw her lift it, smell it, put it back. She was working up the courage, I knew. She always did this, circled her prey before striking. I also paid more attention to David this time around. We met at the same symposium, had the same initial conversations. But this time, When he asked about my work, I was vague, mysterious. I told him I was working on something revolutionary but wasn't ready to share it yet. I could see the hunger in his eyes, not for me, but for what I represented: access, opportunity, money. I still played the role of the smitten girlfriend. I laughed at his jokes, held his hand, let him kiss me. But inside, I was cold. I was watching him, cataloging every little manipulation, every subtle neg, every moment when his attention wandered to something more useful than me. And I was watching Maya watch us. She'd always wanted what I had, but with David, it was more than that. She wanted him specifically because I had him. Because he represented success, sophistication, escape from being second place. I could see her gearing up for the seduction, dropping little comments about how she understood business better than I did, how she'd always been the people person while I was the brain. Perfect. Let her think that. Let them both think I was the naive little genius who'd hand them everything on a silver platter. The night came sooner than I expected. It was a Friday, and David had invited me to a party at his business school. I'd deliberately mentioned it to Maya at dinner, watching Victoria's eyes light up. "Oh, Iris, don't you have that big exam Monday?" Victoria said sweetly. "Maybe you should stay home and study." "Maya could go in your place," my father suggested absently, not even looking up from his phone. "Keep David company. You know how these MBA types are, all about networking." I watched Maya's face carefully. She was trying to look reluctant, but I could see the eagerness underneath. "I don't know," I said slowly, as if considering it. "I guess it would be good to study. And Maya, you do love parties." "I'd be happy to help," Maya said, and her smile was poison. "Great!" I smiled back. Let me text David. "And Maya, you should wear something nice. First impressions matter at these things." I went upstairs, and instead of texting David, I opened my camera app. The feed from my greenhouse came up crystal clear. I watched Maya slip in 10 minutes later, moving straight for the perfume display. She picked up the bottle, held it up to the light. She uncapped it, smelled it, and her face transformed. She'd always been jealous of my perfume. I'd seen her try to buy something similar at department stores, but nothing compared to a custom scent. She looked around, then quickly dabbed it on her wrists, her neck, behind her ears. She was generous with it, I noted with satisfaction. She even sprayed a little in her hair. Perfect. I gave her 20 minutes, enough time for the perfume to settle, for the initial scent to work its magic. Then I went downstairs, dressed for studying in sweatpants and a t-shirt, and knocked on her door. "Have fun tonight," I said brightly. "Tell David I'm sorry I couldn't make it." She was wearing a tight red dress, my red dress, I noticed, though I didn't comment. And she looked beautiful, confident, victorious already. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll take good care of him." I watched her leave, then I texted David. "Maya's coming to the party. She stole my perfume and my dress, thought you should know. I'll be studying, this exam is really important. Have fun." His response came immediately. "That's so weird." Why would she do that? Want me to send her home? No, it's fine. She probably just wants to feel pretty. Let her have fun. The perfect, understanding girlfriend. I could practically feel him falling for the trap. I stayed up all night, not studying, but watching. I'd given Maya a spare phone once, one that I'd paid for in case of emergencies. She didn't know I could access it remotely. I watched her location move to David's building, then stay there for hours. And I waited for the reaction to start. It began around hour 2. I got a text from David. "Is Maya allergic to something? She says her skin is itching." I replied, "Weird. Maybe the dress? It's been in storage." Another hour passed, then my phone rang. It was Maya, and she was crying. "Iris, something's wrong. My skin, it's all red and it won't stop itching." "Where are you?" I asked, all concern. "I'm at David's. We were at the party and I started feeling weird and—" "Come home," I said. "I'll help you figure it out." She arrived an hour later and I barely suppressed my smile. Her neck, her chest, her arms, Everywhere she'd applied, the perfume was covered in angry red welts. She was crying, scratching, miserable. Victoria was horrified. What happened to you? I don't know, but yes, Maya wailed. I just went to a party and… What were you wearing? I asked innocently. She hesitated just for a second. Just a dress. What dress? Victoria pressed. One of mine, I said helpfully. The red one, and Maya, were you wearing anything else? Makeup, perfume? Her eyes widened. I might have borrowed some of your perfume, just a little. I didn't think you'd mind. You never wear it anyway. Which perfume? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. The one in the greenhouse, in the pretty bottle. Oh, I let the silence stretch. Oh no. What? Victoria demanded. What is it? That's not a perfume for wearing, I said slowly. That's a test batch. I've been experimenting with different compounds for my thesis. That particular version has a synthetic molecule that I specifically noted was causing skin reactions. I was going to dispose of it, but I hadn't gotten around to it yet. It was a complete lie, of course, but it was plausible, and more importantly, it put the blame entirely on Maya. You went into my lab and used something without asking? I turned to Maya, letting hurt creep into my voice. Do you know how dangerous that is? Those are chemicals, Maya. You can't just use them because they smell nice. I didn't know, she cried. You never said, because I thought you wouldn't go through my things. My voice rose. God, Maya, what else have you been taking from my lab? Victoria jumped to her daughter's defense immediately. Iris, don't be dramatic. It's just a rash. Maya, come on. We'll get you some Benadryl. But the damage was done. Maya was miserable. Her skin was a disaster. And more importantly, David had seen it all. He'd seen her show up in my dress wearing my perfume, acting as my replacement. He'd seen her break out in hives and have to leave early. He'd seen her desperation to be me. And he'd started to wonder. I got a text from him the next morning. That was really weird last night. Is Maya okay? She'll be fine, just a bad reaction. She shouldn't have gone through my lab stuff. Yeah, hey, can we talk? I feel like maybe I've been insensitive about something. I smiled at my phone. Oh, David, I murmured. You have no idea. The rash took 3 days to fully heal, and during that time, Maya was absolutely miserable. But more than the physical discomfort, I could see the emotional toll it was taking. She'd tried to steal my identity, my scent, my boyfriend, and it had literally blown up in her face. She avoided me for those 3 days, wouldn't make eye contact at dinner, stayed in her room. Victoria kept making excuses for her, but even she seemed less convinced than usual. My father, predictably, noticed nothing, but I wasn't done. The perfume incident was just the opening salvo. I'd learned something crucial in my first life. Maya didn't just want to be me. She wanted to destroy me while becoming me. The stealing, the copying, the seduction of David, it was all part of a pattern. She needed me to fail so that her success felt real. This time, I was going to let her think she was winning right up until the moment I destroyed her. The night after her rash cleared up, I knocked on her door. Maya, can we talk? She opened it reluctantly. What? I wanted to apologize, I said, and watched her eyes widen in surprise. I should have labeled that perfume better. I should have locked my lab. You could have been seriously hurt. Oh. She blinked. Yeah, you should have. I know we don't always get along, I continued, moving into her room and sitting on her bed like we were real sisters having a real conversation. But I don't want you to get hurt. You're my sister. She softened slightly. Maya had always been susceptible to apologies, mostly because she so rarely received them. In our house, she was the golden child who could do no wrong. Having me apologize to her was irresistible. It's okay, she said. I shouldn't have gone through your stuff. Well, to make it up to you, I pulled out a small bottle from my bag. I made you something. A perfume just for you. This one is definitely safe. I added with a laugh. I tested it myself. Her eyes lit up. Really? Really? Consider it a peace offering, and also maybe I wanted to ask for your help. My help? I nodded, letting vulnerability show on my face. It's about David. I feel like he's been distant lately. And you're so good with people, so much better than me at reading social situations. Do you think, could you tell me if you noticed anything at the party? Did he seem interested in anyone else? It was a master stroke, and I could see her mentally adjusting her entire strategy. She'd been caught trying to seduce my boyfriend while literally wearing my identity. But now I was handing her permission to get close to him again, under the guise of sisterly advice. Oh, Iris. She sat down next to me and her smile was sympathetic, but her eyes were calculating. He definitely wasn't interested in anyone else. He was really worried about me, about the rash, I mean. He seems like a good guy. Yeah, I smiled hopefully. That's good. I love him so much. I can't imagine losing him. You won't, she assured me, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. I promise. Over the next few weeks, I played my role perfectly. The insecure girlfriend, constantly asking Maya for advice about David. The distracted student, stressed about my thesis. The naive daughter, still hoping for her father's approval. And Maya fell for it completely. She started spending more time with David, helping by attending his business school events with us, by offering to look over his marketing projects. She was always there, always inserting herself, always wearing the perfume I'd given her. That perfume was real, by the way. No allergens, no tricks. It was a beautiful scent. Lighter than Iris Ascending, more floral, younger. Perfect for Maya's personality. And it smelled exactly like me. Not the same formula, of course, but close enough that anyone who'd ever smelled me would subconsciously associate it with me. I'd used several of the same base notes, the same synthetic molecules, the same concentration levels. The overall effect was similar enough to create that sense of familiarity, but different enough that Maya wouldn't realize what I'd done. I was marking her, making her smell like me, like my shadow, my echo, and every time she wore it around David, around our classmates, around anyone who knew us both, she was reinforcing that she was the copy, not the original. I started wearing Iris Ascending more openly. To class, to dates with David, to family dinners. I made sure everyone knew it was my signature scent, the perfume I'd created for my thesis. Professors commented on it, classmates asked about it, David loved it, and Maya, wearing her similar but not quite the same perfume, smelled perpetually like she was trying to be me. The beauty of it was that she didn't even realize. She thought the perfume was a gift, a peace offering, a sign that I'd accepted her as my equal. She wore it proudly, constantly, and every time she did, she made my point for me. But the perfume was just psychology. The real work was happening behind the scenes. I knew from my first life that Maya and David's affair had started in earnest around midterms of spring semester. She'd helped him with a marketing project about luxury branding, and he'd been impressed by her insights she'd stolen from my business plan. This time, I was ready. I'd rewritten my business plan, made it even better than before, and then I'd created a fake version, good enough to look legitimate, but full of subtle flaws. Bad market analysis, unrealistic financial projections, branding strategies that looked good on the surface but would fall apart under scrutiny. I left this fake plan on my laptop in a folder clearly labeled Perfume Business Final Draft. Then I waited. It took 2 weeks. I watched through the camera I'd hidden in my room as Maya crept in while I was at class. She went straight for my laptop. I'd made sure it wasn't password protected, another sign of my trusting nature. I watched her find the folder, copy it to a USB drive, and slip out. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A week later, David asked if I'd look at a project he was working on, a marketing plan for a fictional luxury perfume brand. I'm just stuck on some of the details, he said. You're so good at this stuff. Would you mind? I made a show of reading through it carefully. It was my fake business plan, barely modified, presented as his original work. This is really interesting, I said slowly. But David, some of these numbers don't make sense. Look, you've got the cost of raw materials way too low, and the production timeline doesn't account for testing and regulatory approval. And this branding strategy, I frowned. It's very generic. It doesn't really differentiate the product. He frowned. Really? I thought it was pretty solid. It's a good start, I assured him. But for a high-end luxury product, you need more sophistication. The target market analysis is especially weak. You're trying to appeal to everyone, which means you'll appeal to no one. I could see the doubt creeping in. He'd thought he had a winner, and now I was poking holes in it. Maybe you're right, he said finally. Can you help me fix it? Of course, I smiled. That's what partners do. I spent the next week helping him completely revise the project. I steered him away from every idea in the fake plan and towards something more generic, less memorable. Something that would get him a decent grade but wouldn't stand out. And I waited for Maya to make her next move. It came during spring break. My father was in Singapore on business, Victoria was visiting her mother in Boston, and Maya suggested that she, David, and I should have dinner together. Like a real family, she said sweetly. I knew what she was really planning. In my first life, this had been the dinner where they'd told me about their affair, where they'd presented my stolen business plan as their joint venture, where they'd asked me to work for them. This time, I was going to flip the script entirely. I showed up to dinner at David's apartment wearing Iris Ascending and carrying a portfolio. Maya was already there, wearing her copycat perfume and a dress that was almost identical to one of mine. David had cooked, or more accurately, ordered in and plated it nicely. This is nice, I said, looking around. Very cozy. We made small talk through the appetizers, but I could feel the tension building. Maya and David kept exchanging looks, and I knew they were working up the courage. Finally, over dessert, Maya cleared her throat. Iris, we wanted to talk to you about something. Oh? I looked up innocently. David and I have been working on something together, she continued. A business opportunity. We think you'd want to be involved. David jumped in. It's a perfume company. We've been developing a business plan, and we think it could be really successful. Maya's got the personality for marketing, I've got the business background, and we'd need someone with your technical skills. We'd want you to be the chief chemist, Maya added. You'd get a good salary, benefits, everything. I let the silence stretch. Then I opened my portfolio and laid out several documents on the table. Is this the business plan you're talking about? I asked, sliding over a copy of my fake plan, the one Maya had stolen. They both froze. Because if it is, I continued calmly, you should know that this plan is fundamentally flawed. The market analysis is based on outdated data. The financial projections don't account for regulatory science. The branding strategy is weak and derivative. And most importantly, I looked at Maya. It's stolen. I don't know what you're talking about, Maya said, but her voice was shaky. Maya, I watched you break into my room and copy files from my laptop. I have video. I pulled out my phone and showed them a clip. Maya, at my desk, USB drive in hand. I left that plan there because I wanted to see what you'd do with it, and you did exactly what I expected. I turned to David, and you took stolen work and presented it as your own for your marketing class. That's academic dishonesty. You could be expelled. His face went white. Iris, I didn't know it was stolen. Maya says a lot of things, I interrupted. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw that project and submit something else. You're going to tell your professor you made a mistake. You used sources that weren't properly yours. You'll probably get a 0 for the assignment, but at least you won't be expelled. And me? Maya asked, trying to sound defiant but failing. You? I smiled. You're going to stop stealing from me. You're going to stop going through my things, copying my work, wearing my clothes, and trying to become me. Because if you don't, I'm going to show Dad every piece of evidence I have of what you've been doing for the past 10 years. I pulled out a thick folder. I've been documenting everything, Maya. Every theft, every lie, every time you've sabotaged me. I have photos, videos, receipts. I have your fingerprints on my laptop. I have text messages you thought you deleted. I have everything. Victoria had trained Maya to believe she was untouchable, that our father would always side with her. I watched that certainty crumble as she realized the extent of what I'd prepared. "You can't," she whispered. "I can," I said. "And I will if you ever cross me again." "But Maya, here's the thing. I don't want to destroy you. I just want you to leave me alone. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I turned to David. "And you. We're done. Not because you tried to steal my work, although that's certainly part of it, but because I see you now. You never loved me. You loved what I could give you: access, opportunity, my family's money. You're a parasite, and I'm done being your host." I stood up, gathering my things. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, pausing at the door. "That perfume you've been wearing, Maya, the one I gave you, I designed it specifically to smell like me. Close enough that everyone who knows us both will associate it with me, but different enough that it's obvious you're the copy, not the original. You've been walking around for weeks smelling like my shadow. How's that feel?" I left them sitting there in shocked silence, and I felt lighter than I had in months. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The real revenge I'd learned in my first life wasn't about personal satisfaction. It was about permanent, irreversible consequences. Breaking up with David and threatening Maya into submission was gratifying, sure. But it didn't solve the fundamental problem. They were still there, still circling, still waiting for another opportunity. Maya was still Victoria's favorite. My father still didn't care about me. I still had no real protection, no real power in my own family. That had to change. I spent the next few weeks putting together the final pieces of my plan. I worked on my thesis, the real one, with the real iris ascending formula. I scheduled my defense for early May. And I started reaching out to my mother's family. My mother, Elizabeth Jang, had come from serious money. Her father, my grandfather, was Richard Jang, founder of Jang Industries, one of the largest chemical manufacturers in Asia. My mother had been his only child, and when she died, my father had assured the Jang family that I would be well cared for. But somewhere along the way, my father and grandfather had a falling out. The visits stopped. The phone calls ended. By the time I was 10, I didn't even remember what my grandfather looked like. In my first life, I'd been too intimidated to reach out. But this time, I had nothing to lose. I found his office number through LinkedIn and called on a Monday morning. "Zhang Industries, how may I direct your call?" "This is Iris Chen," I said. "I'd like to speak with Richard Zhang. Tell him it's his granddaughter." There was a long pause, then, "Please hold." I was transferred 3 times before a man's voice came on the line. Older, rough, but strong. "Iris? Grandfather." My voice cracked despite myself. "I don't know if you remember me." "Remember you?" He laughed, but it sounded sad. "Child, I've thought about you every day for 13 years. Your father made it very clear I wasn't welcome in your life." "He was wrong," I said. "And I'd like to fix that, if you're willing." We talked for 2 hours. He was in San Francisco, a 3-hour drive from Stanford. He invited me to visit that weekend. I went alone, telling Victoria and Maya I had a conference. My father was in Tokyo, as usual. My grandfather's house was in Pacific Heights, a beautiful Victorian with a view of the bay. He answered the door himself, a tall, thin man in his 70s with my mother's eyes. "You look just like her," he said. And then he hugged me, and I found myself crying for the first time since my rebirth. We spent the whole day together. I told him everything, about Victoria and Maya, about the years of abuse and theft, about how my father had checked out of my life. I didn't tell him about dying and coming back. That would be too much. But I told him enough. I have something to show you, I said finally, and I pulled out my portfolio. Not the fake business plan, but the real one. My thesis. My formula. My dream. He read through everything carefully, asking sharp questions, making notes. He'd built a chemical empire. He knew what he was looking at. This is extraordinary, he said finally. Iris, this could be huge, but you can't do it alone and you can't do it with your father's money. He'll use it to control you, and that stepmother of his will find a way to give it all to her daughter. I know, I said. That's why I came to you. He smiled, and it was fierce. What do you need? We spent the next few hours talking business. He couldn't invest directly. There were complicated legal reasons involving his company's bylaws and my father's pride. But he could invest through a venture capital firm he had connections with. He could provide expertise, connections, mentorship. He could protect me. There's one condition, he said. After graduation, you come work for me for a year, not on this perfume business, that's yours. But in my company, learning the business side, Jawing Industries could use your chemistry expertise, and you could use the experience. Deal, I said immediately. And Iris? He squeezed my hand. I'm sorry I let your father keep you from me. I thought I was respecting his wishes, giving him space to build his new family. I didn't realize he was letting them hurt you. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. I drove back to Stanford feeling like I had armor for the first time in my life. I wasn't alone anymore. I had backup, resources, family who actually cared about me. Now I just had to defend my thesis, launch my company, and watch Maya and Victoria's world crumble. My thesis defense was scheduled for May 15th. I'd invited my father, Victoria, and Maya, knowing they probably wouldn't come, but wanting the rejection on record. I'd also invited my grandfather, though I didn't tell anyone else about it. To my surprise, my father said he'd be there. Of course I'll come, he said absently over the phone from whatever airport he was in. It's important to you. Victoria and Maya declined, as expected. We have a charity luncheon, Victoria said, not even pretending to sound sorry. The defense itself was in a large lecture hall. My committee was there, 4 professors, including my advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation. There were also other graduate students, a few industry professionals who'd been invited, and sitting in the back row, my grandfather. My father rushed in 5 minutes late, took a seat in the middle, and immediately pulled out his phone. I didn't let it bother me. I'd spent 2 years preparing for this moment, 2 years in this life and 2 years in the life before. I knew my material inside and out. I started with the chemistry, the synthesis of my novel molecule, the properties that made it unique, the testing I'd done to prove its stability and safety. Then I moved into the perfumery aspects, the design process, the iterations, the final formula. Finally, I discussed the commercial applications, the market analysis, the business potential. My presentation lasted 45 minutes, and then the questions began. They were tough. My committee wasn't going to give me an easy pass just because the work was good. But I had answers for everything. I'd anticipated every possible question, prepared every defense. An hour later, my committee asked me to step outside while they deliberated. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding. In my first life, I'd passed with distinction and immediately moved forward with my business plans, plans that Maya and David had stolen. This time, I was passing with the same distinction, but everything else was different. The door opened. Dr. Chen was smiling. Congratulations, Dr. Chen, she said, and I felt my eyes fill with tears. Your defense was one of the best we've seen in years. The committee is recommending you for the Departmental Award for Best Thesis. I walked back into the room in a daze. My committee shook my hand, congratulated me, asked about my plans. My grandfather came down from the back row and hugged me fiercely. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. My father was still on his phone. When he finally looked up and realized everyone was leaving, he approached awkwardly. So, how did it go? I passed, I said flatly. With distinction, they're recommending me for an award. That's great, honey. He smiled, but it was distracted. Listen, I have to catch a flight to Munich, but we should celebrate when I get back. Sure, Dad. I watched him leave and I felt nothing. But my grandfather put a hand on my shoulder. Let him go, he said. He doesn't deserve you, and he never did. But you and we're going to change the world. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I officially graduated summa cum laude. The departmental award came through, along with a cash prize and recognition at the ceremony. My grandfather attended, my father sent a card. Victoria and Maya came to graduation mainly because refusing would have looked bad. I watched them sit in the audience, Maya's face twisted with jealousy as I accepted my various honors. After the ceremony, my grandfather approached them for the first time in years. Victoria, he said coolly. Maya, how nice to see you both. Victoria went pale. She knew exactly who Richard Jang was, and she knew what his presence meant. Richard, she said, trying to smile. What a surprise. Iris and I have been reconnecting, he said. She's been telling me all about her life at Stanford. It's been very illuminating. The threat in his voice was subtle but clear. Victoria gripped Maya's arm. How wonderful, she managed. Family is so important. Indeed. His smile was sharp. Which is why I'm investing in Iris's new business venture. I think you'll be seeing a lot more of me from now on. I watched Victoria realize that everything had changed. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't defenseless. I had power, money, and family support. And there was nothing she could do about it. My father, oblivious as always, chose that moment to appear. Richard, I didn't know you were coming. Iris invited me, my grandfather said. We've been spending quite a bit of time together lately. She's been filling me in on everything I've missed. My father shifted uncomfortably. That's great. Really great. We should have dinner, my grandfather said. All of us. I think it's time we had a family conversation about Iris's future. That dinner happened a week later at an expensive restaurant that my grandfather chose. He'd specifically selected a place that was public enough to keep everyone on their best behavior, but private enough for difficult conversations. My father, Victoria, and Maya sat on one side of the table. My grandfather and I sat on the other. It felt like a negotiation, which I suppose it was. My grandfather didn't waste time with pleasantries. Richard, I'm going to be direct. I've learned some disturbing things about how Iris has been treated in your household. The favoritism, the theft, the emotional abuse. I'm not happy. My father bristled. Now wait a minute. I'm not finished. My grandfather's voice was steel. I understand that you remarried. I understand that blending families is difficult, but your daughter, your blood daughter, the child of my Elizabeth, has been systematically mistreated, and you've allowed it. That's not true, Victoria interjected. We've always treated both girls equally. Don't insult my intelligence, my grandfather cut her off. I've seen the evidence. I've heard the stories. I know exactly what's been happening. He pulled out a folder, one I'd prepared for him, full of documentation. Photos of my belongings in Maya's room, screenshots of messages, financial records showing disparities in spending. This ends now, Manen, he said. Iris is graduating and moving forward with her own life. She'll be working with me for a year and then launching her perfume company with my backing. I don't expect any interference from any of you. Maya spoke up for the first time. What about me? Don't I get to what? I asked, looking at her directly. To steal my formula again? To copy my work and claim it as yours? To try to seduce my business partners? She flushed red. Victoria reached for her hand. Iris, that's unfair, Victoria said. Maya made some mistakes, but some mistakes? I laughed, and it came out bitter. She's been stealing from me for 20 years. She broke into my lab, copied my files, tried to take everything I've built. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. You always were dramatic, Victoria said coldly, and there it was. The mask slipping, the real contempt showing through. My grandfather stood up abruptly. This dinner is over. Richard, you have a choice to make. You can continue to enable this toxicity, or you can start being an actual father to Iris. But know this, if I hear of one more incident of theft, manipulation, or abuse directed at my granddaughter, I will take legal action. I'll tie up every asset you have in litigation. I'll make sure everyone in your social circle knows exactly what's been happening. Are we clear? My father looked shell-shocked. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, I think you're overreacting. Then we're done here. My grandfather took my arm. Iris, let's go. We walked out of that restaurant, and I didn't look back. The next year was transformative. I moved into an apartment in San Francisco near my grandfather's house. I started working at Zhang Industries, learning the business side of chemistry, supply chains, regulatory compliance, intellectual property law. It was hard work, but it was also fascinating, and I was good at it. In the evenings and on weekends, I worked on my Perfume company. My grandfather introduced me to investors, helped me find a manufacturer, connected me with distributors. We built the brand from the ground up, not just Iris Ascending, but an entire line of sophisticated, unique fragrances. We launched in Fashion Week the following September. The flagship scent was Iris Ascending, of course, but I'd developed 5 others, each one a masterpiece, each one impossible to copy. The line was a massive hit. Within 3 months, we were sold out everywhere. Within 6 months, we'd secured contracts with major department stores. Within a year, we'd gone international. I named the company Ascension. The tagline was impossible to replicate. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the backstory. As for my family, my old family, things fell apart exactly as I'd expected them to. My father, shaken by my grandfather's ultimatum, tried to make amends. He called me weekly at first, then monthly, then not at all when I made it clear I wasn't interested in rebuilding a relationship he'd never actually built in the first place. Victoria and Maya were another story. Without me as a target, they turned on each other. Victoria, desperate to maintain her lifestyle, pushed Maya harder and harder to succeed. But Maya, lacking anyone to copy, floundered. She dropped out of her master's program. She went through 3 jobs in 2 years. She started drinking too much, partying too hard, trying to recapture the feeling of being special, of being the favorite. Victoria, watching her investment fail, grew bitter and controlling. The screaming matches between them became legendary in their social circle. And then, about 18 months after my graduation, I got a phone call from my father. Iris, it's Dad. I need to talk to you about something. What is it? I was at a product launch in Paris, exhausted but triumphant. I didn't have time for his drama. It's Victoria. She and Maya. There's been a situation. It turned out that Maya, desperate and broke after being cut off from my father's money, my grandfather had convinced him to stop enabling her, had stolen Victoria's jewelry and sold it. All of it, including a collection of antique pieces worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Victoria had called the police. Her own daughter, arrested for theft. She's asking if you'll help, my father said quietly. Post bail, maybe testify as a character witness. No. Iris, she stole from me for 20 years, and no one helped me. She tried to destroy my career, my relationships, my entire life. Why would I help her now? Because she's your sister. She's not my sister, I said, and my voice was cold. She's a thief who happens to share a house with me growing up, and she's facing the consequences of her choices, just like I had to face the consequences of her choices for most of my life. You've changed, my father said, and he sounded sad. No, I corrected him. I died and came back stronger. You just never bothered to know me in the first place. I hung up. Maya was convicted of grand theft. She served 18 months in minimum security, and when she got out, Victoria had divorced my father and moved to Florida. Maya followed her, and I never heard from either of them again. My father, left alone in the penthouse he'd built his empire to afford, finally understood what he'd lost. He reached out a few more times over the years. Birthdays, holidays, awkward attempts at reconciliation. I was civil but distant. He was a stranger to me, and that was his choice as much as mine. 5 years after my rebirth, I stood in that same penthouse, but everything was different. My father had died suddenly of a heart attack. He'd left everything to me, the penthouse, his company, all his assets. Victoria and Maya had contested the will, of course, but my grandfather's lawyers were better than theirs. I walked through the empty rooms, remembering all the years I'd spent here feeling invisible, unwanted, less than. I thought about the girl I'd been, the girl who'd thrown herself off the balcony rather than face one more day of being erased. And I thought about the woman I'd become, CEO of a successful company, heiress to 2 fortunes, known and respected in my field, happy. I walked up to the roof garden, the place where I'd ended my first life. The sun was setting over the city, painting everything gold. My phone buzzed. It was my grandfather. "Did you go to the penthouse?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm here now." "How do you feel?" I looked out at the view, at the city where I'd built my empire, at the life I'd created from the ashes of my death. "Victorious," I said, and I smiled. I'd worn my perfume today. Iris ascending, the scent that had started everything. It had faded slightly throughout the day, but I could still smell it on my wrist when I lifted my hand. My scent, my creation, mine. Maya had tried to steal it, tried to be me, tried to take everything I'd built, but she'd only ever been a copy, a shadow, an echo. And I was the original. I left the penthouse and never went back. I sold it a month later to a nice family with 3 daughters, and I hoped they'd fill it with laughter and love and all the things I'd never had there. As for me, I bought a beautiful Victorian in Pacific Heights, 2 blocks from my grandfather's house. I filled it with my perfume bottles, my notebooks, my art. I filled it with friends and light and the smell of jasmine from the garden. And every morning I woke up and put on my perfume, my signature, my identity, my proof that I'd survived and thrived and won. The scent of victory, it turns out, is sweet. But the scent of revenge? That's even sweeter. The final chapter came 3 years later, at a charity gala I was hosting for a foundation I'd started to support young women in STEM. The event was at a luxury hotel ballroom, attended by everyone who mattered in the business and fashion worlds. I was standing near the entrance, greeting guests when I saw her. Maya. She'd aged poorly. The drinking, the stress, the bitterness, it had all taken its toll. She was thin in an unhealthy way. Her clothes were expensive but slightly worn, and she had that desperate look of someone trying to reclaim past glory. She saw me and froze. For a moment, I thought she might leave, but then she straightened her shoulders and walked over. Iris. Maya. We looked at each other, 2 women who'd shared a house but never a home, who'd been called sisters but never felt like family. "I heard about your father," she said stiffly. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." "And I heard about all this." She gestured around at the gala, at the banner with my foundation's name, at the evidence of my success. "You've done well." "I have," she swallowed hard. "Hana, look, I know we didn't end things well, but I was hoping. I'm trying to get my life back together, and I thought maybe you could help. A job at your company, or maybe an investment in a project I'm working on, or even just." "No." She blinked. "What?" "No, Maya. I'm not going to help you. Not now. Not ever." "But we're family." "We're not family," I said, and my voice was gentle but firm. "We never were. You stole from me, sabotaged me, tried to destroy me for 20 years. You made my life hell, and you felt no remorse. You only feel sorry now because you're facing consequences." "I've changed," she said desperately. I've learned." "Maybe you have, I acknowledged. And if that's true, I'm glad for you. But it doesn't mean I owe you anything. You made your choices, Maya. You chose cruelty over kindness, theft over honesty, destruction over support. And now you get to live with those choices. Tears started streaming down her face. Please, I have nothing. Victoria won't talk to me. Your father left me nothing. I can't find work. Then you understand exactly how I felt for most of my childhood, I said quietly. Living in a house where no one cared about me, where everything I had could be taken away at any moment, where I was worth less than nothing. The difference is I was a child who did nothing wrong. You're an adult who made terrible choices and got caught. I turned away, then paused. Maya, I hope you do get your life together. I hope you find peace and happiness and some form of redemption. But you won't find it through me. I'm not your sister. I'm not your savior. And I'm not your second chance. I'm just the person you tried to destroy who refused to stay destroyed. I walked away, back into my gala, back into my life, and I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard her crying. Part of me, a very small part, felt sorry for her, but mostly I felt free. Later that night, after the gala ended and the last guests had left, I stood on the hotel balcony looking out at the city. My city now in a way it had never been before. My grandfather found me there. He was 83 now, slowing down but still sharp, still fierce when it came to protecting me. I saw Maya, he said. Yeah. You handled it well. Did I? I turned to look at him. I feel like maybe I should have been kinder. She looks so broken. She broke herself, my grandfather said firmly. You didn't do that to her. Her choices did that to her. I know, but still, no buts. He squeezed my shoulder. Iris, you have spent your entire life being kind to people who didn't deserve it. Your father, Victoria, Maya, that boy David, you gave them chance after chance and they threw it back in your face. You died because of them. You literally died. He didn't know about my rebirth, of course, but in a way he was right. The girl I'd been, that naive, trusting, desperate to be loved girl, she had died, and I'd been reborn as someone stronger, harder, more ruthless. I just don't want to become like them, I said softly. Cruel, vindictive. You're not like them, my grandfather assured me. You're not cruel, Iris. You're just done being a victim. There's a difference. I thought about that, about the line between justice and cruelty, between protecting yourself and destroying others. I have a foundation that helps young women, I said finally. I donate to causes. I mentor students. I try to be the person I needed when I was younger. That's not cruel. No, he agreed, then that's powerful. We stood there in comfortable silence watching the city lights. Your mother would be so proud, he said eventually. Elizabeth always said you were special. She knew you'd do great things. I just wish she'd lived to see it. Me too, I whispered. But maybe in a way she had. Maybe that's what my rebirth had been. A gift from my mother, a chance to become the woman she'd always believed I could be. Or maybe I'd just been incredibly, impossibly lucky. Either way, I'd made the most of it. 10 years after my rebirth, Ascension was one of the top luxury perfume brands in the world. We'd expanded into skincare, cosmetics, even haute couture collaborations. I'd been featured in Forbes, Vogue, Time. I'd been called a genius, a visionary, a self-made success. The irony of self-made always made me smile. I'd had help, my grandfather's investment, his connections, his mentorship, but I'd also had to claw my way up from nothing twice. Once in my first life where I'd failed, once in my second where I'd succeeded. I visited my parents' graves sometimes. My mother's was peaceful, covered in flowers I had planted. My father's was next to hers, which felt wrong somehow, but I hadn't had the heart to separate them. I made it, Mom, I said to her headstone. I did everything you hoped I would. I'm happy. And I was. I had a company I loved, work that fulfilled me, wealth that gave me security, and friendships that sustained me. I'd even started dating again, carefully, cautiously, but with an open heart. I'd learned something crucial. Revenge was satisfying, but it wasn't the same as happiness. Destroying Maya and David and Victoria hadn't made me happy. Building something beautiful and meaningful, that had made me happy. The revenge had just cleared the path. One day, I got a letter. It was from Maya, forwarded through my lawyer. She was in rehab, apparently, working on herself. The letter was full of apologies, acknowledgments of harm, requests for forgiveness, but, importantly, no requests for help or money. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she wrote. "I don't even deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did to you, how much I hurt you, how much I damaged my own soul in the process. I'm trying to be better, not for you, you owe me nothing, but for myself." I read the letter 3 times. Then I wrote back. "Maya, I'm glad you're working on yourself. I hope you find peace and redemption. But I need you to understand, I will never have a relationship with you. Not because I'm cruel, but because I'm protecting myself. You showed me who you were for 20 years. I believe you. I wish you well, but from a distance. Be well." I sent it and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a quiet sense of closure. She'd been my antagonist, my villain, my worst enemy. But in the end, she was just a sad, broken woman who'd made terrible choices. She didn't deserve my hatred anymore. She also didn't deserve my forgiveness or my time. She deserved exactly what I'd given her: honest acknowledgement, firm boundaries, and the freedom to fix herself without using me as a crutch. The final scene of my story, if stories ever truly end, happened on my 35th birthday. I threw a party at my house in Pacific Heights. Not a gala, not a business event, just a party for the people I loved. My friends from Stanford, my colleagues from Ascension, my grandfather's family, even some of the women I'd mentored through my foundation. We drank champagne, ate good food, laughed until we cried. Someone made a toast about how far I'd come. Someone else told an embarrassing story from my Stanford days. My grandfather, 93 and still stubborn, made a speech about how proud he was of me. And I stood there, surrounded by people who actually cared about me, wearing my perfume, iris ascending, always. And I realized something. I'd won. Not because Maya was broken, or Victoria was gone, or David was irrelevant. Not because I was wealthy or famous or successful, though I was all of those things. I'd won because I was happy. That was the real revenge, the ultimate victory. Not destroying them, but building a life so beautiful, so full, so complete that they became irrelevant to my happiness. Maya had worn my perfume on her first date with David, trying to steal my identity. After my rebirth, I'd made her smell like my shadow, my echo, my pale imitation. But in the end, the perfume didn't matter. The revenge didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd learned to value myself, to protect myself, to build a life worthy of the woman I'd become. And that was a scent no one could ever steal. I raised my glass, surrounded by love and laughter and light, and I made a silent toast to the girl I'd been, the one who'd jumped from a balcony, broken and desperate. Thank you for dying, I thought. Thank you for giving me the chance to be reborn. Thank you for teaching me what I deserved. I built this for us. The party continued into the night, and I danced and laughed and lived, wearing my perfume like armor and victory, and a promise to myself that I would never, ever let anyone diminish me again. The scent of triumph lingered in the air, mixing with jasmine from my garden and champagne and joy. And somewhere in another life or another timeline, the girl who'd died on the marble driveway smiled. She'd gotten her revenge, but more importantly, she'd gotten her life.